You're watching BreakThru News.
I'm Charlotte Thun-Hohenstein, and you're watching BreakThru News on BTR today. June is PTSD Awareness Month, post-traumatic stress disorder. With me in the studio today is Captain Luis Carlos Montalvan, who served 2 tours in Iraq, received 2 Bronze Stars, the Purple Heart, several other awards. Thank you very much for your service, Luis.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Luis, you're also a New York Times best-selling author for your book, Until Tuesday, about your remarkable story with Tuesday, who is here in the studio with us, and how Tuesday changed your life. And you also advocate for veterans issues, PTSD awareness, and a whole host of things.
Yes,
if I'm right. Your story is very unique, right? I mean, you were serving in Iraq, and it was during the first tour that you were attacked and sustained injuries that would then later lead to more difficult conditions. Am I right?
Yes, that's right.
Can you tell us a bit about what happened?
Well, though there were a number of events in each tour that I served, and I think this is true of many servicemen and women who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, but in other conflicts too. For me, not a single particular event, though there are several that are more prominent, or one would think to be more prominent, is the most difficult challenge about post-traumatic stress disorder, because you see, at least for me, the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder that are the most difficult, namely hypervigilance, flashbacks, nightmares, and some panic attacks, they're not caused by a single event. For me, they're mostly caused by the prolonged nature, the sustained nature of being in combat for 7 months and then a year. When you're in a situation that is perilous for protracted periods of time, being hypervigilant becomes a natural state. But then, when you come out of those conflict zones, the body doesn't just switch off. And so, even though in Until Tuesday, our first book, there are a number of incidents relating to trauma that one can call attention to. It's the difficulty that I have with PTSD, and that I think that most people have with PTSD, regardless of how they sustained a trauma, be it a criminal act, be it child abuse, be it a natural disaster, be it war, is not necessarily fixating on that particular event or a singular event. It is, I think that's a big misconception. It's the day-to-day feelings of not necessarily reliving a particular singular event. It is feeling terror. It is feeling panic. It is feeling stress. It is feeling anxiety and hypervigilance caused by noises, by smells, by crowds, by the darkness, by anything that may remind you or subconsciously trigger that sort of thing.
So would you say it's fair to say that it's cumulative?
Yes,
in a way?
Actually, that's very succinctly put it. It is a cumulative struggle, or at least and I think, particularly for combat veterans who may have been in Vietnam for a year, when you're in when you're in a zone and you can't trust anybody because the enemy isn't wearing uniforms. You know, it's not like Germany or Japan. You don't know who to trust. And so when you come back to New York, or when you come to, you know, Des Moines, or wherever you may be, it doesn't turn off. The brain has physiologically changed, and though you know that you're not in Vietnam or in Iraq or Afghanistan, you still have these feelings of mistrust and of anxiety, and that you deal with.
Do you think that there's a huge misconception with people who are sort of on the outside of this, and just on the outside of the army in general, about that difficulty of reintegrating back into civilian life? Because from the most simplistic perspective, it's very easy to fall into thinking, well, you're not in the danger zone anymore, you know, so what's the big deal, you know? And what you're describing is this residual state that you bring back with you. Do you think not enough people realize that?
Yes, I think that's a very good point, Charlotte. I think that, and I think that's true of issues relating to any mental or invisible condition, disability. But I think you're getting at, you know, an event happened, you know, get over it. Or an event, so, you know, an event happened, you know, in Louisiana. An event happened in Newtown, Connecticut. An event happened in Iraq. You're not there. This isn't the same time. You know, we all deal with bad things that happen or have to deal with them, and so there's sort of a terse nature to it, you know. Although at the same time, I think that the public, at least with regard to veterans and service members, there tends to be you know, some sort of initial compassion. They don't really understand what it's like.
Right, and that initial compassion can very quickly turn into frustration if you have different standards, you know, and different expectations for how someone should be behaving. But you, is it fair to say that, I mean, Tuesday turned your life around, right? I mean,
yes.
Well,
I want
to
address your point about how compassion can turn to what did you say again? Frustration. Frustration. Yes. More troublesome. Apathy. You know, apathy. And I think that's evidenced clearly by in the way in which veterans are cared for or not cared for, or the amount of lip service that is played by politicians and others who say that they care, who thank veterans, and yet it doesn't go beyond that. It's the so what, you know. To your second point, though, yes, Tuesday, my beloved service dog. Tuesday, sit up. Tuesday, sit up.
Tuesday. Wow, such a gorgeous
up. Come
gorgeous
on,
dog.
don't be lazy. Tuesday, up.
I think he's perfect. Is he comfy? If he's comfy,
Yeah,
I'm comfy.
The amazing thing, and that's contrary to what we were just talking about, is that dogs and other furry spirits, but dogs in particular, they constantly care about us. It doesn't turn off. It doesn't. it doesn't go away, and they exude an energy, a spirit, a love that is comforting, that is confidence building, and that is counter to many of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Let's talk about the role of dogs and increasing role of dogs in therapy, because it certainly seems to be a newer idea that's gaining traction. I know in 2009, Senator Al Franken's bill, Service Dogs for Veterans Act, came into effect, which was in part inspired by you. It seems like there's a lot of research pointing to how powerful this type of therapy can be. And there's a Paws for Purple Hearts program where veterans will actually train the dog over several months, and this one study showed that there was an 82% reduction in symptoms, and even after 1 week there was a reduction on average of half the amount of medication and much less anxiety reported. And yet I notice on the government website about PTSD, which is certainly very helpful in general, but it's just advocating cognitive behavioral therapy and medicine, which I'm sure play a huge part. But do you think that there's not enough awareness right now of this kind of therapy and using service dogs?
Indeed, I think that there needs to be more education and awareness with regard to both canine and equine modalities of therapy for mental health conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder, but also for physical disabilities and how they can be bettered. The issue right now in this country and in some other countries is that there's no, believe it or not, there's no hard scientific evidence. There are quite a number of studies underway to figure out or determine what most humans already know, since we've been
certainly anyone who has pets knows
well, yes,
this.
but I mean, the dog has been humanity's best friend for 33,000 years. They're,
pretty good track record.
Yeah, so it's it's unfortunate that rather than let's say take a presumptive approach to the efficacy of canines to ameliorate the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, and pair trained dogs with veterans and other people, there is this withholding of funds and resources to get these dogs trained and partnered, and that's really a shame, because it's not only disabling veterans from reintegrating and transitioning on with their lives, but it's also I would wager that it's costing people's lives.
Wait, I mean, that's a very strong statement, but it's probably true. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I know it's true, because we've received so many thousands of letters since until Tuesday was published, from people, veterans and non-veterans, who've said that were it not for my beloved dog, I wouldn't have made it through this trauma. I wouldn't have made it through that calamity. And that may sound hyperbolic, but it's true. I mean, it may not be an instantaneous sort of demise, let's say, but what happens typically is that people can get depressed and downtrodden, and then they turn to substances, abuse substances, many of them, myself included, and then it's a very slippery slope down to suicide and other conditions that can be fatal.
Right, accidental or not.
Precisely, or criminal acts, or domestic violence, and so we really need to urge our elected officials, I think, and those of it, people who are in influence to, yes, ensure that these studies are concluded. But we can have a Service Dogs for Veteran Act, not just on the federal level.
Right.
Each state could have a Service Dogs for Veteran Act.
Mm.
We can earmark more funds to get these dogs like Tuesday trained and out there, and help improve and save lives.
Well, we're going to have to take a quick break in a moment, but I just wanted to finish this first debate segment with touching on again why Tuesday has been such a powerful force in your life. And you mentioned this idea of unconditional love that a dog is able to give, which unfortunately maybe humans aren't as free in that regard. And even if they want to be, do you think there's also a degree of just of actually training the dog, because that's also quite an important component, right? Is you train the dog together, right? And you train them how to behave, and that in turn helps you actually internalize those ideas and lessons. Is it fair to say that?
It's 100% right that dogs, that canines, unlike humans, we are inhibited. Humans are inhibited, and I think it's because of the level of sophistication of our brains. We're so sophisticated that we intellectualize things so much, and we get so wrapped up in the let's say hypothetical ulterior motives, not necessarily Machiavellian, but what is it that this person wants? What is this person feeling? What is this person doing? That we cannot sense the genuine nature. We have walls that we project. We have walls that we have to sort of get through in order to relate to other humans, whereas dogs and other furry ones, they don't. They really are like children in a way. They're raw and they're pure, and so therefore we can trust that. And that is very enabling.
Well, Tuesday seems very at ease right now, which is nice.
He is.
We're going to be right back in a moment after a brief excerpt from this week's episode of Serious Business featuring Split Signal.
Make room for others. Time to know where I'm going if I'm able. Simple scaffolds, leading traces once were marks. On my searching for your lonely hiding heart. Though you are not clear, familiar emptiness appears on my searching.
We're back with Luis and Tuesday on our discussion of PTSD. Luis, you were mentioning earlier this idea of actually a slow demise. And that might be part of the problem for someone who's struggling with PTSD, knowing at what point they need to reach out and ask for help. Is there anything you can say in terms of advice about, when to actually do that and be honest with yourself?
I know I keep saying it, but that's really these are very thoughtful questions that you're asking. So thank you for that. We do a lot of interviews, and sometimes the questions are pretty bad.
I won't ask you which ones.
No. This question is so good because it's, and going back to the last point of discussion, we all are raised to be tough. Our parents in general raise us to be tough, to be resilient, to deal with problems, and we tell ourselves that. We, in fact, I think, bombard ourselves with, stand up straight, and don't let them see you sweat, and don't ask for help, because then it's a sign of weakness, and I need to look like, I'm making it, to my friends and my family and my and yet we've managed to do that so well that we have actually caused ourselves injury in being too proud. Pride as a source of self-flagellation almost. It's so important, and I didn't know this. I was like everyone else. It's so important that if you think you are feeling the effects, an effect, a symptom of that is deeper than what you conceive to be normal.
Right, because everyone's going to have different emotional sort of cycles in lives.
In being honest,
you have to go with how you're feeling.
Yes. So using, being honest with oneself about how one is feeling, and then being able to be your own sort of physician and say, is what I'm feeling really unhealthy? Is this really unhealthy for me? Is this really affecting my relationships, my job, my intimate relationships, my friendships? If the answer is yes, if the answer is I'm not sleeping well and I'm much more stressed than I'm despondent or something along those lines, I think it's really critical to be to self-assess rightly, and to be proactive with oneself, and to say, listen, I need to get help. I need to ask for help. I need to talk about this with a loved one. I need to talk about this with maybe someone who's impartial. But the reality of being honest with oneself and then having the courage to do something about it as quickly, as immediately as one can, because I think these things can tend to fester.
And for people who are on the outside, either just as a family member or a complete stranger, what's the best way to behave around someone who has PTSD? Like, how do you be sensitive to that? I mean, and especially if with soldiers, there's already such a huge gulf of experience right there, and then having PTSD on top of that, there's no way really that someone's going to know what it's like. So how can we be sensitive?
Isn't that such the magic question, or the question of it all, is how are we sensitive? How are we compassionate? How are we genuine? How do we show that we genuinely care about someone, to engage that we may know well or that we may not know well? How do we break the ice? What sort of icebreaker is there that is appropriate? And I think really, I could suggest any number of things, but I think, if you think that someone is struggling with a trauma, I think you just have to be, be compassionate and show some courage and speak with them, and not necessarily in an invasive way, but in a friendly way, and ask them how they're doing. Ask them, talk about. I think we are all much more empathetic than we give ourselves credit. That we feel.
That's very nice.
That we feel when someone is not feeling well, but yet we tend to, again, mentally overtake ourselves in this notion of reaching out. And so if we just, well, I think you may. I just noticed you seem a little down. You seem a little quiet. Or are you okay? Can I help you? Would you like a glass of water? I mean, it's amazing how these little acts of kindness, these little, can mean the difference between a person's day and even a person's trajectory.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to take all of that on board. I know that in 2009, June 27th was made PTSD Awareness Day, and now we have the entire month of June for PTSD Awareness Month, so hopefully this will have an effect. Thank you very much, Luis and Tuesday, for joining me in the studio today. To continue the conversation, share your thoughts with us on Twitter at BreakThru News. We'll be right back in a moment after this quick excerpt from a special episode of Live Studio featuring Aloud.
Don't say the thing for tonight. Don't say the thing. Universe will give and take. We desire. So live it up till the heat is gone. And the stars catch fire.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm Charlotte Thun-Hohenstein and this is BreakThru News, your window into today. Be sure to check out breakthrough.radio.com through the weekend for our continued Breakthru Week coverage on BTR, including our story on trendy new pre-work morning rave parties that have sprung up in New York City. That's it for what's breaking through the news today. Tell us what's breaking through your world on Twitter at BreakThru News. I'm Charlotte Thun-Hohenstein and thank you for joining us.